Okay, so let's take a look at this Excel project or this exam 5 review, right? So this is our exam 5 review. Really, what it's going to do is it's going to cover three things. It's going to be covering uh, Excel Project 1, Excel Project 2, and also Excel Project 3. You will only be given 80 minutes to complete exam 5. 80 minutes is how long it takes our class, so I'm not going to give you additional time, which means it's important to start the exam when you're telling me that you're going to start it. Because what I'm going to do is, as I mentioned on the email before, is I am going to send you exam 5 minutes before you start your exam. Then you'll give it 80 minutes to complete it. And then I expect to receive your exam by the end of those 80 minutes. If I don't receive it, you will get a 0 and there is no exceptions. So I would encourage you to give yourself maybe about 10 minutes to make sure that you know how to send it. And you should know how to work every single thing that we did on Excel Project 1, Excel Project 2, and Excel Project 3. So let me just give you a little example here. Let's say someone starts at 10 a.m. Right? If it starts at 10 a.m., that means their exam will end at. So I'm actually going to give you. I'm going to give you 80 minutes to complete the exam. Plus 10 minutes. That's for receiving my email / sending that email. So you get a total really of 90 minutes. Right? And 90 minutes is equivalent to, what is it, an hour and a half? All right. So if a person starts at 10 a.m., and I need to stress this, must receive the email no later than 11:30 a.m. Otherwise, the student receives a 0% on exam 5. So I just want to start there. Before we continue, is there any questions on that? If you do have questions, by all means, feel free to type the questions out and ask me. Or you can go ahead and just ask them. Take your unmute your mic and ask the questions if you have any.
The way I sent it, like I didn't send it the way you did the video on. It's a button on there on Excel. It automatically just says share, and that's what I was hitting. So can I do it like that?
Yeah, I mean, I received all 3 of yours, so that's fine. I mean,
okay.
If I received yours, and you received a grade, and I think everyone in the class did, so then the way you're sending it is fine. But I would also encourage you to let's add this, and I think this is very important. You should, or I would strongly encourage. I would strongly encourage to CC yourself on the email. And the reason for this is because this will have the date and time, because that's what I'm looking at, y'all.
Okay.
If I'm supposed to receive an email by 11:30 a.m., I'm gonna look at my email, and if that email says 11:45, you get a 0. But if you have an email that says, look, Mr. Santoyo, I emailed it to myself and I got it before 11:30, then you get that credit.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Any other questions? Because once again, I'm going to be sharing this. And
Did you receive my email for tomorrow?
I'm going to look. I haven't looked at the emails in regards of dates and times yet. But we can look at that once I'm done recording here. We can talk about that. Any other questions about this exam process?
No.
How many questions?
We're going to be talking about that. Like I said, it's just like exam 1, just like Excel project 1, just like Excel project 2, just like Excel project 3.
Okay.
If you know how to do it, if you know how to do those, then you'll do fine. Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started here. The way I would like your exam 5 set up. So let's start with, you're going to have 3 parts, obviously. So let's start with part 1. Okay. I'm going to give you some data, right? And let's just say this data consists of numbers 1, 3, 4, 2, 4, 5, 4, 7, 8, 9, 2, 3, 4. I don't want to give you guys too many numbers, so that way, are y'all going to follow along as well, or y'all just going to view what I'm doing?
I'm following.
Okay. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, I think I'm going to give 15 numbers, okay? So I'll repeat the numbers. It's 1, 3, 4, 2, 4, 6, 4, 7, 8, 9, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. Okay, just like on the Excel Project 1, first thing I'm going to ask you to do is make a frequency distribution table. All right, that's the first thing I'll ask you to do, is to make a frequency distribution table. When it comes to that frequency distribution table, you should understand that you're going to have 2 columns. First one is the values, and the next one is the frequency, right? So we have our data items and frequency. And we arrange them from smallest to largest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think is what I have. You continue to make your table, right? So just like you did before. Any questions here?
No.
Okay, and then we just enter the and also I'm going to arrange these numbers from smallest to largest, right?
Yes.
We want to arrange them from smallest to largest. And then we just type the frequency of each. 1 is seen once, 2 is seen twice, 3 is seen twice, 4 is seen 4 times, 5 is seen twice, 6 is seen once, 7 once, 8 once, 9 once. And then we're just missing one last row, right? Total, and then we have we use our sum formula, don't we?
Yes.
Right, so equals sum, open parentheses, highlight those numbers and hit enter. That should also be on our table. So that'd be the first part, just making the frequency distribution table there. Any questions on there?
No.
Okay. The next thing you did was you should have been able to represent what the 15 stands for, right? So 15 represents, what is it that it represents, y'all?
It represents all the frequencies from the data.
Or yeah, it represents specifically just the data items, right? We have 15 data items or data values, right? So you should know what that means there. Okay, any questions there? Any questions?
Nope, I think it's just me now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I don't know where Jasmine went.
Oh, yeah,
I think
she's gone. Okay. So moving on, C is what we're looking at next.
Oh, there she's coming.
Okay. C is the next part. You're going to be asked to construct a frequency polygon. Now you'll be asked to construct a frequency polygon. And if you recall, in regards to making a frequency polygon, all we do is click the numbers in the table. I'm starting at the top left, so we start with this one, we click, and we bring it all the way down to this one down here. We don't include the 15 because then it includes words, and we can't put words in our graph, right? So top left to the bottom right, you highlight those. Then you should be able to insert, hit this insert button. And then from there, we're just clicking on this line. I think that's one way of doing it, right? And well, maybe not the line. Doesn't seem like it's the best one. What else can we do? I think, did I say recommended charts in our video, maybe?
We clicked on charts.
Yeah, and then these pop up, right?
You get that one.
Yeah, you insert that chart. But some things that we need to keep in mind with this, right, is that we need to make sure we add our points in here, right?
Yep.
And how do we add those points? Right, so we go to chart. Right. First, let's take off some things. We don't want to display the chart title, but we do want to display. We do want these horizontal and vertical axes labeled correctly. Right. So we should be able to click in here, or let's see.
Yeah, we have to click up there.
And
yeah,
then,
you have to select it.
Oh, there we go. Yes. And then, so we click on X's title, and then we're going to edit. So this is our X, or this is our data items, right?
Yeah.
And then, what is the vertical represent?
Frequency.
Yeah. This graph is missing something. What is it missing?
Our dots.
Dots and one other thing as well, right? You see how we just see these lines going left and right? Not only do we want those,
Down our horizontal line.
yeah, we also want a horizontal grid line. So grid lines, we want to enter the vertical ones, right? All right. And how do we enter the dots? Y'all remember how to enter dots?
Go back to lines, I think it is.
Lines?
Yeah, and click on the first one. Yeah.
There we go. Very good. Okay, so this is really, this is all you did for part one. So I'm going to give you data items, and this is what you're going to do. Okay? Any questions there? What I want you to be able to do is I want you to be able to separate part one, part two, and part three. So what I want you to do once you're done with part one, click on a couple of, I'm clicking on these numbers, two of them numbers, dragging it down to highlight all of the cells in that row, and I'm just gonna make it black. That way I know that this up here is part one, and this is where part two will start. Okay, so this is how I want y'all to do it. That way I can distinguish part one from part two. Okay, so once again, I'll give you some data.
Did you just select the cell styles and fill it?
Yeah. So let me go back again. Right, all I did is click on two numbers, 20, 21. I clicked, did not let go. Once I let go, I highlight all that, right? And then there's this little bucket here. Y'all see that bucket?
Yeah.
I just clicked that down arrow, chose the black color, and then it made all of those cells black.
Okay.
All right, so part two. Once again, I'm going to give you some data, right? 2, 3, 4, 2, 5, 3. And I'll ask you to find the measures of central tendencies, right? Find all measures of central tendency. I'll ask you to find all measures of dispersion. And then last part, prove by a table that the standard deviation is correct. Right? So those will be the three things that I'll ask you to do. Which means you'll definitely be required to know all of this stuff, right? Measures of central tendency are mean, median, mode, mid-range. Measures of dispersion are our range and our standard deviation. Right, so we will start off by, I'm going to organize my data, right? Smallest to largest. Then I just find each one. How do we find the mean? It's equals what?
ABE.
Good, AVE. We see average. All right, double click that. Highlight your numbers, hit enter. How do we find our median?
MED.
Good, equals MED. All right, we see median, double click that. Highlight those numbers. Mode.
MOD. I think
Good.
it's like the second one.
Good.
Multi?
No, it's the second one, not the first
Oh,
one.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Right. Right, good.
Yes, that one.
Double click that. Highlight. And how do we find the mid-range?
It's no mid-range. You subtract the highest number from the lowest number.
So it's equals, no. How do we find the mid-range? That's the range that you were just talking about.
So it's the lowest number, the highest.
We're doing addition, so equals open parentheses. The highest plus the lowest, close parentheses, divided by 2.
And then enter.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What happened with my mode? Let me see my mode. Equals MOD.
Middle.
There we go. Okay. Really quickly, you will be required to round as well, right? So you should be able to round that mean. I'm not going to do that rounding, but I can ask you to round to the tenths, hundredths, or thousandths. So you should know how to do that. Yes.
Okay, like I think it was the last, because I did 2 as the last one, because that was the last one I had got. But I had to actually go back and move my decimals for my answers to come out right, because I think on the second one when you do range? No. Something you had to add up and get 0. And I kept getting like negative or 7 or something.
Oh yeah, I talked about that when we get to the table part. So I'll talk about that when we get to part C.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So the range, right? Our range is equals. This is where we do the highest minus the lowest. All right. Your standard deviation is equals, and then what do we do there?
STA, I think.
Right. It's ST, and then all of a sudden we'll see the standard deviation of our sample. So dot S. Good. All right. So once again, I will ask you to round. Right, standard deviation, you'll be asked to round it to some decimal placement. Any questions? Any questions here? Okay, so now we want to prove standard deviation is correct, right? So our table is what? X. The next one is X minus our mean, right? Next one is X minus our mean to the power of 2. And I think we just have those 3, don't we? So we list our X's. I got a 2, I got a 2, I got a 3, I got a 3, I have a 4 and a 5. And then we just do equals. We say it's our 2. We're going to subtract it from our mean. All right, we do it again. Equals our 2. We subtract it from our mean. Again, equals our 3. We subtract it from our mean. Again, equals our 3. We subtract it from our mean. Equals 4. We subtract it from our mean. Equals 5. And we subtract it from our mean. So Jasmine, this is the part that you were talking about where you summed everything up, because remember, this X minus our mean is called our deviation. So if we were to sum, according to the textbook, if we were to sum all this, it should equal 0, right?
Yes.
But sometimes you might get something like an E on there with a negative 15 or negative 13 or something like that. If you get something like that, that means it's really, really close to 0, so that means everything is correct so far. But it's a good way to check your work. I would encourage you to do that. Okay? It's not a necessity, but you can do that.
Okay.
Okay, any questions so far?
I don't even know what I got wrong on part. I think part 1 and part 2. I know I got something wrong.
Are you talking about like on what you submitted?
Yeah.
How can we see what we got wrong?
You just have, well, you can't see what you got wrong, but you can see your grade. If it's not 100, then definitely you got something wrong, and then you can talk to me about it more one-on-one.
Okay.
Okay, so next part is equals. We just do this, and we take it to the power of 2. We hit enter, right? And you repeat that process, and I think I showed you this little trick to make it a little easier on yourself, right?
Whoa, wait, what? How did you do that?
So I showed that on the video as well, right? You click on that cell that has that formula, and all of a sudden it turns into a little plus symbol. You click, hold, drag it down, and it copies that formula for you.
Oh, man.
Only works for that one. Does not work for X minus mean.
I was doing it one by one.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. So what we have here is our table, right? I'm going to go ahead and make this table here. Our next step was to sum the last column, right? Then we did n minus 1. What is our n?
5.
Well, remember, n refers to how many data items we have, right? And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? So 6 minus 1 gives us a what? 5. I saw some people not do that, subtracting 1, and just put n, and that's why they lost some points. Okay, and this is where we are going to see if our answer is correct, or if we did our work correctly. So we do equals. We're going to do the square root, right, of that number. We're going to divide it by this 5. We hit enter, and we see that our numbers, in fact, are the same.
They're exact.
Right, and they should be. They should be. Right. So if they're not, something went wrong. If they're not, something went wrong. Okay. All right. Any questions on part 2?
No, but I did something wrong because both of my numbers were different.
Yeah. Also, I want to talk about this here really quickly because I see you guys working on. Some of y'all have already completed part 1 of your review, and when you start on part 2. Part 2 is going to be all on chapter 12, right? So you're going to have a lot of problems. Find mean, median, mode, mid-range, standard deviation, correlation coefficient. You can use Excel when you're working on your final review because doing this table by hand takes a long time, right? And just finding the standard deviation by the use of Excel makes it very easy. So I'd encourage you to get comfortable with Excel, so then that way when you're doing final review part 2 and your final, you use Excel. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, any questions on part 2? Okay, so moving on, once again, we want to distinguish part 2 from everything else. I don't have too much time. Let's continue here. Let's see. Right, once again, this is what distinguishes part 1 from part 2. So now we can go to our part 3. Right, and once again, I'll give you some data. Right, usually this is now represented by a table. All right, so maybe something that looks like this. I got my X and Y values there. I'll ask you first of all to part A would be to what? Construct a scatter plot. Right, so you should be comfortable with constructing a scatter plot, right? What we do is we highlight the numbers from top left to the bottom right, right? Hit on click insert, then we should see that scatter plot option, right? And we label our X and Y axis, right? So we have X axis, and then we have Y axis. Any questions here so far? Any questions? And then I think I just asked you to do one last, or ask you to do I asked you to find the correlation coefficient. And describe it. I ask you to find the correlation coefficient and describe it. Right. I'm also going to ask you to round it, so that's why I'm putting an additional box there. So, how do we find the correlation coefficient? We had equals, right? Then we type in our CORR, coral, click on that, highlight the X values, hit comma, highlight the Y values, and you can see that they're separated because the X's are in blue, the Y's are in yellow, or in red, different colors. All right, you hit enter. And then you should be able to round it, whatever way I ask you to round it. How do we describe this correlation coefficient? All right, this is where I would strongly encourage y'all to, you either look at the textbook, and you can find the textbook just on, right? So you can go to textbook 12.6, or view my video. But I talk about all these correlation coefficients. People lost points on Excel Project 3 because I did not hear things like strong correlation coefficient. These are your options. It's either strong correlation coefficient, moderate correlation coefficient, weak correlation coefficient, no correlation coefficient, and they're either positive or negative, right? So you should be able to tell me whether it's strong, weak, a moderate, no correlation, and that's being positive or negative. People were kind of on the right idea, but once again, I want to hear those phrases. So you should be able to identify that. This example, this correlation coefficient is 0.13. So if this was your problem, what would you say that this correlation coefficient is? Anyone know? This would be a weak correlation coefficient, right? 0.13 is a weak correlation coefficient. So once again, you can look at the textbook on 12.6, and the textbook is found on your program. You just look at multimedia library, or look at my video, either one. So. And that's it, right? After that, just add your name and send it out to me. So, any questions? Any questions on this review here?
And I have a question. In part two, can we do the in X minus mean the way that you do in the other one, like you're gonna hold it?
No,
like
you
that?
can't.
You have to.
Because let me show you. Let me show you what happens if you try to do that. If you do, right? 2 minus. You can definitely see that these two numbers are the same right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what happens if I drag it down? Look at these numbers; they're completely different.
Yeah.
Because when you drag it down, it follows the number to the left. So when I dragged it down, it follows this number. It follows that number. It follows that number. It follows that number. It follows that number. If you try to drag it down, then it's going to follow 2. It's going to follow 3. It's going to follow 3. But x minus the mean is 2 minus what? 3. So when you're dragging it down, it just now did 2 minus 3. That's how you got -1. It did 3 minus 2. That's how the 1 came about. It did 3 minus 3.5. That's how that -0.5 did. It did 4 minus, there's nothing there, so 0. That's why it's a 4. It did 5 minus, there's no number there, so that's a 0. So that's why that would not work.
Mhm.
So very good question. Once again, you can only do that trick for the last column. Good. Any other questions? Okay. As I mentioned at the very beginning, just another reminder. Exam 5 covers Excel Project 1, 2, 3. You should know how to do those. Have those memorized. You're only going to get 80 minutes to complete the exam, and then 10 minutes in regards of receiving my email with the exam that I send you, and then also within those 10 minutes, you need to be able to send me your exam. So I'm giving you a total of 90 minutes or an hour and a half to complete exam 5. And this is just a little example, but you tell me when you want to take it, and it starts exactly when it starts, and it's going to end an hour and 30 minutes later, right? It'll end an hour and 30 minutes later. And if I don't get your exam within that time frame, you are getting a 0, no exceptions at all, right? I will not give any extensions. It is a 0. At this point, everybody has emailed me Excel 1, Excel 2, and Excel 3, which means you know how to email me material, okay? All right, y'all. So I'm going to go ahead and we have less than a minute here, so I'm going to end this, but I'll come back and answer some more questions. And as I mentioned, CC yourself on that email as well, okay? All right, so let me go ahead and end this video, and then I'll come back up. So if y'all have any more questions, I can answer those for you individually. Okay? So I will see y'all here shortly.